The first signs of the coming change are not always found in the sky, but along the vertical plains of human shelter, where stillness meets exposure. On the outer wall of a house, beneath the quiet frame of a window, or along the narrow ledge of a door, small armored figures begin to assemble. Shieldbugs, with their broad, angular bodies and muted earth tones, appear almost as if placed there deliberately, their shapes echoing the geometry of the surfaces they cling to. They arrive without sound or urgency, yet their presence marks a precise biological response unfolding in real time, triggered by subtle shifts in temperature, air pressure, and humidity that precede a storm. Each individual moves with deliberate care, guided not by sight alone, but by a combination of sensory inputs that interpret the environment in ways far removed from human perception. Their antennae sweep slowly, detecting chemical traces and gradients in the air, while fine sensory hairs along their bodies register minute changes in airflow. As atmospheric pressure begins to fall, a signal associated with approaching instability, shieldbugs respond by seeking surfaces that offer both warmth and structural security. The outer walls of a house provide an ideal solution, acting as thermal reservoirs that absorb heat during the day and release it gradually, creating a microclimate that remains more stable than the rapidly shifting conditions of the open environment. The vertical orientation of these surfaces is not incidental. For a small insect navigating a complex landscape, a wall represents both a boundary and a refuge, a place where the risk of predation is reduced and the options for concealment increase. Birds, which often hunt visually, are less likely to detect prey pressed flat against a uniform background, especially when the insect's coloration mimics the subdued tones of bark, stone, or painted surfaces. This cryptic adaptation, refined over countless generations, allows shieldbugs to occupy exposed positions while remaining effectively hidden, their stillness becoming a form of defense as potent as any chemical deterrent. Yet stillness is only part of their strategy. Beneath the hardened shield that gives them their name lies a complex physiological system tuned to balance energy conservation with rapid response. As temperatures fluctuate in the hours before a storm, shieldbugs engage in a subtle form of thermoregulation, adjusting their position on the surface to maximize heat absorption or minimize exposure to cooling air currents. A slight shift from shadow into a narrow band of sunlight can mean the difference between maintaining metabolic function and entering a state of reduced activity, where movement slows and responsiveness diminishes. The gathering itself is not coordinated in the way that social insects organize their colonies, yet it produces a similar visual effect. Dozens, sometimes hundreds, of individuals converge on the same architectural features, drawn by the same environmental cues and constrained by the same physical realities. Window frames, with their narrow seams and protected edges, become focal points of accumulation. Here, the boundary between interior and exterior offers both opportunity and risk. The smallest gap, invisible to the human eye, represents a potential pathway inward, a transition from the exposed outer world to a more stable, enclosed environment. This movement toward cracks and edges is not driven by any awareness of human habitation, but by an evolutionary history shaped by natural shelters such as tree bark, rock crevices, and layered vegetation. The structures of a house replicate these features with remarkable fidelity, providing artificial analogues of the spaces shieldbugs have always used to survive periods of environmental stress. As the storm approaches and wind begins to disturb the surrounding vegetation, these insects respond by tightening their grip, anchoring themselves with specialized tarsal claws that can adhere to a wide range of surfaces, from rough wood to smooth glass. In this moment, the house becomes part of the ecosystem, not as an isolated human construct, but as an extension of the landscape, offering refuge to organisms that interpret it through entirely different sensory frameworks. The presence of shieldbugs on its surfaces is not an invasion, but a convergence, a meeting point between human architecture and insect survival strategies. What appears to be a sudden arrival is in fact the visible outcome of a finely tuned interaction between biology and environment, where even the smallest changes in weather can redirect the movement of entire populations. As the first drops of rain begin to fall and the air thickens with moisture, the still forms along the walls remain, pressed close to the surfaces that now shelter them. Some will find their way into the narrow seams and hidden spaces, disappearing from view as they enter a temporary refuge that mirrors the natural shelters of their past. Others will remain outside, enduring the storm through a combination of physical resilience and behavioral adaptation. In either case, their presence tells a story of anticipation and response, of organisms that read the environment with precision and act with quiet efficiency, long before the storm fully arrives. Beneath the visible structure of a home, beyond the living spaces shaped for light and movement, there exists a quieter layer of habitat where darkness settles into corners and persists without interruption. In basements, behind storage shelves, within the narrow cavities of utility walls, conditions remain steady even as the outside world begins to shift. Air thickens with the approach of rain, humidity rises, and subtle fluctuations ripple through soil and vegetation. Yet within these enclosed spaces, the environment holds a different rhythm, one defined by insulation, stillness, and layered shelter. It is here that the presence of the Madagascar cockroach finds its ecological logic, not as an anomaly, but as a predictable response to instability beyond the structure. Unlike many insects that rely on flight or rapid dispersal, the Madagascar cockroach is built for persistence within confined environments. Its body is broad and heavily armored, lacking wings but compensated by powerful legs adapted for climbing and gripping uneven surfaces. The absence of flight is not a limitation in this context, but an advantage, reducing energy expenditure while increasing maneuverability within tight, complex spaces. As external humidity rises before a storm, many natural shelters such as leaf litter or decaying wood become saturated, losing the balance of moisture and airflow that these insects require. The cockroach responds by seeking environments where humidity remains controlled and where physical structures provide layered protection, conditions that human buildings replicate with remarkable consistency. In a basement corner where stacked materials create overlapping surfaces, the microclimate stabilizes in a way that mirrors the forest floor of its native habitat. Cardboard, wood, and fabric absorb and release moisture slowly, creating gradients that allow the insect to position itself precisely according to its physiological needs. Too much moisture risks fungal growth and respiratory stress, while excessive dryness can lead to desiccation. The Madagascar cockroach navigates this balance through behavioral thermoregulation and moisture selection, moving between microzones that differ by only slight degrees, but offer critical advantages for survival. Darkness plays an equally important role. The cockroach's sensory world is not dependent on vision in the way many predators are. Instead, it relies on long, highly sensitive antennae capable of detecting minute vibrations and chemical signals. In the absence of light, these sensory structures become primary tools for interpreting the environment. Air currents shifting through a crack, the faint scent of organic material, or the distant movement of another organism all contribute to a continuous stream of information. This allows the cockroach to navigate complex three-dimensional spaces without exposing itself to open areas where predation risk would increase. As weather conditions deteriorate outside, the structural boundaries of a building begin to function as ecological filters. Small openings that would otherwise remain unused become pathways, not because the insect seeks human proximity, but because these routes lead to environments that meet specific biological criteria. A garage, with its layered storage and intermittent warmth, offers a gradient of conditions that can be exploited over time. A utility space, filled with pipes and conduits, provides both shelter and subtle temperature variation as water moves through the system. These are not random choices, but the result of evolutionary pressures that favor individuals capable of identifying and utilizing stable refuges during periods of environmental stress. Within these spaces, interactions with other organisms continue, though often unnoticed. Microbial communities thrive on organic residues, forming the foundation of a food web that supports scavengers like the cockroach. In turn, the cockroach contributes to the breakdown of organic matter, fragmenting materials and facilitating further decomposition. This role, often overlooked, positions it as an important participant in nutrient cycling, even within the artificial confines of a human structure. Predators may also be present, from small arachnids to opportunistic vertebrates, creating a dynamic environment where survival depends on constant awareness and rapid response. One of the more distinctive features of the Madagascar cockroach is its ability to produce a hissing sound, generated by forcing air through specialized spiracles along its body. While often associated with defense or social interaction, this behavior also reflects a broader adaptation to communication in low-visibility environments. Sound, in this context, becomes a secondary channel of information, capable of deterring potential threats or signaling to other individuals without reliance on visual cues. It is a reminder that even within confined, human-made spaces, the complexity of insect behavior remains intact, shaped by evolutionary pathways that extend far beyond the walls that now contain them. As the storm fully develops, the contrast between exterior chaos and interior stability becomes more pronounced. Rain saturates the ground, wind disrupts vegetation, and temperature fluctuations create a landscape of uncertainty. Inside, the basement remains dim and controlled, its layered structures absorbing the impact of these changes. The cockroach, settled within this environment, continues its quiet navigation, moving through a network of surfaces and spaces that offer both protection and opportunity. The encounter, when it occurs, is not an intrusion, but a moment of overlap between human and insect worlds, each shaped by different needs, yet connected through the shared use of shelter. In this convergence, the Madagascar cockroach reveals a broader truth about survival. Stability is not a fixed condition, but a resource to be sought, evaluated, and maintained through constant adjustment. Human buildings, though designed for entirely different purposes, inadvertently create environments that fulfill these criteria with precision. What appears as an unexpected presence is, in reality, the visible outcome of a finely tuned ecological response, where an insect adapted to darkness, humidity, and shelter finds continuity within the structures that humans have built to protect themselves from the very same forces. Along the edges of a house where structure meets open air, the materials themselves begin to take on ecological meaning. Beneath eaves and along exposed beams, the grain of wood holds a quiet history of growth, shaped by seasons and weather long before it became part of a human structure. In these overhanging margins, where rain is deflected and sunlight arrives at shifting angles, the surface remains relatively dry even as the atmosphere thickens with approaching instability. It is here that carpenter bees concentrate their activity, drawn not only by shelter, but by the very substance of the house itself, which offers both refuge and resource in a single continuous form. The approach of unsettled weather alters the conditions of the surrounding landscape in subtle but significant ways. Soil moisture rises, flowers close or reduce nectar production, and the exposed surfaces of dead wood in natural environments begin to absorb water, becoming less suitable for excavation. Carpenter bees, which rely on dry, workable wood to construct their nesting galleries, respond to these changes by shifting their focus toward more stable substrates. The wooden elements of a house, particularly those protected by overhangs, maintain a consistent dryness that allows for continued excavation even as rain threatens the broader environment. This makes eaves, porch frames, and sheds not incidental points of contact, but focal zones where biological necessity intersects with human design. As a bee hovers near a beam, its movement appears deliberate yet fluid, each adjustment guided by a complex sensory system attuned to texture, vibration, and chemical composition. The surface of the wood is not uniform from the insect's perspective. Variations in density, grain direction, and prior exposure to weather create a mosaic of microhabitats, each offering different levels of resistance and suitability for tunneling. The bee tests these surfaces with its mandibles, applying pressure and responding to feedback that determines whether the material can be shaped into a nesting chamber. This behavior reflects a finely tuned adaptation, where the ability to assess structural properties at a small scale directly influences reproductive success. Once a suitable location is identified, the process of excavation begins, transforming the static architecture of the house into an active biological site. The bee uses its powerful mandibles to remove small fragments of wood, working with precision to create a circular Pravish hole that leads into a series of internal tunnels. These galleries are not random, but follow the grain, extending horizontally and branching into chambers where eggs will be laid. Each chamber is provisioned with a mixture of pollen and nectar, forming a compact mass that will sustain the developing larva. This act of construction is both destructive and generative, altering the material while simultaneously creating a protected environment for the next generation. The presence of multiple bees in these areas during periods of changing weather creates a dynamic environment where individual territories overlap and interactions become more frequent. Males, which do not possess stingers, often patrol the vicinity of nesting sites, hovering in place with a persistence that can appear confrontational. Their role is to intercept potential mates and deter rivals. Yet their behavior also contributes to the perception of increased activity around entry points, such as doorways and porches. This concentration is not aggression directed toward humans, but a byproduct of the alignment between nesting sites and architectural features that people use regularly. Thermoregulation plays a subtle but critical role in this process. The wooden structures of a house absorb heat during periods of sunlight and release it slowly, creating a thermal buffer that moderates temperature fluctuations. For developing larvae within the galleries, this stability is essential, as it influences metabolic rates and developmental timing. The positioning of nests under eaves or within shaded beams ensures that extreme temperatures are avoided, while still allowing enough warmth to sustain growth. In this way, the architecture of the house inadvertently replicates the thermal properties of natural nesting sites, such as sun-exposed tree trunks with protective overhangs. Beyond the immediate interaction between bee and wood, a broader ecological network begins to emerge. The pollen collected by carpenter bees often comes from a wide range of flowering plants, linking the structure of the house to the surrounding landscape through the movement of resources. As the bees forage, they contribute to pollination, transferring genetic material between plants and supporting the reproductive cycles of species that may be located far from the nesting site. This creates a connection between the built environment and the natural ecosystem, where the activities of a single insect can influence processes occurring across multiple spatial scales. Predator dynamics also intersect with this environment. Birds that specialize in locating insect larvae may learn to recognize the subtle signs of carpenter bee activity, such as small crevice holes or accumulations of wood fragments beneath nesting sites. In some cases, these predators will exploit the galleries, breaking into the wood to access the developing bees. This introduces a layer of risk that shapes the behavior of the bees, influencing where and how they construct their nests. The choice of location, therefore, reflects not only the suitability of the material, but also the balance between accessibility and protection. As the weather continues to shift and the first signs of rain appear, the activity around these wooden surfaces persists with quiet intensity. The bees continue their work, moving between foraging and excavation, adjusting their behavior in response to changing light, temperature, and humidity. For a brief period, the edges of the house become a zone of concentrated ecological interaction, where material, climate, and biology converge. The encounter that unfolds in these spaces is not accidental, but the result of a shared reliance on the same physical structures, each shaped by different needs, yet aligned through the constraints of the environment. In this intersection, the house is revealed not as a barrier between human and natural worlds, but as a participant within a larger system, offering resources and conditions that organisms have evolved to recognize and exploit. The carpenter bee, in turn, embodies a form of adaptability that allows it to navigate these spaces with precision, transforming static materials into dynamic habitats. What appears as a simple presence near a doorway or beam is, in reality, the visible expression of a complex set of interactions, where survival is negotiated through the careful reading of both natural and constructed environments. As evening settles and the air begins to thicken with moisture, the landscape undergoes a transformation that is felt more through sensation than sight. Humidity rises in advance of the storm, softening the edges of the environment and altering the way scent and heat move through the air. In this shifting atmosphere, longhorn beetles emerge from the hidden spaces where they spend the day, their elongated bodies and sweeping antennae built for a nocturnal world defined by gradients rather than clarity. They move not with haste, but with a steady, purposeful momentum, navigating through vegetation and open space as the first signals of instability ripple outward across the terrain. The approach of a storm reshapes the aerial environment in ways that directly influence insect movement. Moist air carries chemical signals more effectively, amplifying the cues that guide beetles toward food sources, mates, or suitable habitats. At the same time, fluctuations in temperature and pressure disrupt the predictable patterns of airflow that these insects rely on for orientation. For a longhorn beetle in flight, the air becomes less consistent, with currents shifting unpredictably and reducing the efficiency of long-distance navigation. In response, these beetles often descend toward more stable reference points, seeking surfaces that provide both physical contact and a clearer framework for movement. Human structures, particularly houses, become prominent features in this altered landscape. Walls rise vertically from the ground, presenting broad, uninterrupted plains that contrast sharply with the irregular forms of trees and shrubs. Doors and porch frames create defined edges, while exterior lighting introduces a new dimension entirely, one that extends beyond the natural cues of the environment. As darkness deepens, these lights act as focal points, not merely illuminating the surroundings, but actively drawing insects into their sphere of influence. The longhorn beetle, sensitive to both light and contrast, responds to this sudden concentration of brightness, adjusting its trajectory toward what appears to be a stable and significant landmark. When the beetle reaches the surface of a wall or door, its movement shifts from flight to contact, its legs gripping the material with precision. The texture of painted wood or composite siding provides enough variation for the insect to anchor itself, while the vertical orientation offers a simplified plane for exploration. In this position, the beetle's long antennae extend outward, sweeping the air and surface in wide arcs. These structures, often longer than the body itself, are equipped with sensory receptors capable of detecting chemical signals at extremely low concentrations. They function as both navigational tools and environmental sensors, allowing the beetle to interpret its surroundings in detail, even in low-light conditions. The attraction to illuminated entry points is not solely a matter of brightness, but of contrast and orientation. Artificial light disrupts the natural relationship between insects and the night sky, where many species use celestial cues to maintain a steady course. In the presence of a nearby light source, this system becomes confused, leading the beetle into a pattern of movement that brings it repeatedly toward the illuminated area. The porch light, in this context, becomes a point of convergence, where multiple individuals may arrive independently, each responding to the same altered set of cues. The result is a concentration of activity that appears sudden and localized, yet is driven by broader environmental changes. Humidity further enhances this effect by influencing the beetle's physiology and behavior. As moisture levels increase, the risk of desiccation decreases, allowing for longer periods of activity and more extensive exploration. The exoskeleton, while protective, is not entirely impermeable, and maintaining water balance is a constant challenge for terrestrial insects. In humid conditions, this balance becomes easier to sustain, encouraging movement and increasing the likelihood of encounters with large, conspicuous structures. At the same time, the softened air carries the scent of wood and organic material more effectively, potentially guiding beetles towards surfaces that resemble their natural habitats. Longhorn beetles are closely associated with wood, particularly in their larval stage, where they develop within the tissues of trees, feeding on cellulose and contributing to the breakdown of dead or weakened wood. This relationship with wood persists into adulthood, influencing their choice of resting and exploratory surfaces. A house, constructed in part from wood or materials that mimic its properties, presents a familiar substrate, even if it lacks the biological context of a living tree. The beetle's presence on a doorframe or porch beam reflects this underlying association, where the physical characteristics of the material align with the insect's evolutionary history. Predator interactions also play a role in shaping this behavior. Night-active predators such as bats may exploit the increased insect activity around lights, creating zones of heightened risk. The beetle, in turn, must balance the benefits of navigation and moisture with the dangers of exposure. Its relatively large size and robust exoskeleton provide some protection, while its tendency to remain still when threatened reduces the likelihood of detection. Pressed against a vertical surface, its outline becomes less distinct, blending into the background in a manner that reduces visual contrast for potential predators. As the storm draws closer and the first gusts of wind begin to move through the area, the beetles remain anchored to these surfaces, their presence a quiet indicator of the environmental shifts taking place. Rain may soon follow, further altering the conditions and eventually dispersing the activity. For a brief period, however, the house stands as a central landmark within a dynamic system, its walls and lights intersecting with the movement of organisms responding to forces far larger than themselves. In this convergence, the encounter between human and insect is revealed as a moment of overlap within a shared environment, where structure, light, and weather combine to create conditions that both attract and sustain life. The longhorn beetle, guided by sensory adaptations refined over generations, interprets the house not as an obstacle, but as a feature within its navigational landscape. What appears as an unexpected arrival is, in reality, the visible expression of a complex interaction between atmospheric change and biological response, unfolding quietly on the surfaces we often overlook. At ground level, where the built edge of a house meets soil, stone, and scattered debris, a different kind of activity begins to emerge as the weather turns unsettled. The air grows heavier, pressing gently against surfaces, while the wind loses its steady direction and begins to shift in uncertain currents. In these transitional conditions, small movements along the base of walls become more apparent, not because they have suddenly begun, but because they have intensified and concentrated into visible clusters. Firebugs, with their striking red and black patterns, gather in numbers along foundations, between stones, and against the lower reaches of exterior walls, forming dense assemblages that seem almost deliberate in their arrangement. Their coloration, bold and unmistakable, serves as a warning rather than a concealment. Unlike many insects that rely on blending into their surroundings, firebugs advertise their presence through aposematic coloration, signaling to potential predators that they are unpalatable. This chemical defense, derived in part from compounds obtained through feeding on plant seeds, allows them to occupy exposed positions with reduced risk. As they cluster together, this visual signal is amplified, creating a collective display that reinforces the message. The group becomes more than a sum of individuals, its patterning merging into a larger, shifting field of contrast that deters opportunistic predators such as birds or small mammals. The clustering behavior itself is a response to environmental variability, particularly changes in temperature and wind. Firebugs are ectothermic, relying on external heat sources to regulate their body temperature. The surfaces along a house foundation provide a mosaic of thermal conditions shaped by the materials used in construction and their interaction with sunlight and ambient air. Stone retains heat differently than soil, and painted walls reflect or absorb light in ways that create gradients across even small distances. By moving collectively within these gradients, firebugs can maintain an optimal temperature range, shifting slightly as conditions change to avoid both overheating and excessive cooling. As the atmosphere becomes more unstable, wind patterns at ground level grow more erratic, disrupting the thin boundary layer of air that insects depend on for stability. Open areas become less predictable, increasing the energetic cost of movement and raising the risk of displacement. In contrast, the sheltered spaces near foundations and between stones offer protection from these disturbances. Here, airflow is reduced, and the physical structure of the environment breaks up gusts into smaller, less disruptive currents. The firebugs respond by concentrating in these zones, their bodies pressed close to surfaces where friction and shelter combine to create a more controlled microenvironment. This aggregation also has implications for moisture regulation. As humidity rises before a storm, surfaces begin to retain a thin film of moisture, altering the balance between hydration and desiccation for small organisms. Firebugs, while tolerant of a range of conditions, must still manage water loss through their exoskeleton. By clustering together, they reduce the surface area exposed to moving air, effectively creating a localized environment where humidity remains slightly higher than in the surrounding space. This collective buffering reduces the rate of water loss, allowing individuals to conserve resources during periods when conditions fluctuate rapidly. The foundation of a house, often overlooked as a purely structural element, becomes in this context an active ecological interface. Cracks, seams, and the irregular arrangement of stones provide not only shelter, but also pathways for movement. Firebugs navigate these spaces with a combination of tactile and chemical cues, their antennae constantly sampling the environment. The scent of conspecifics plays a role in maintaining the cohesion of the group, as individuals are drawn toward areas where others have already gathered. This behavior, while not coordinated in the manner of social insects, results in a stable aggregation that persists as long as the environmental conditions favor its formation. Feeding behavior continues even within these clusters, though it may be less visible. Firebugs are primarily seed feeders, often associated with plants such as mallows and linden trees, whose seeds provide a rich source of nutrients. The proximity of these food sources to human structures is not uncommon, as ornamental plantings and urban vegetation create a patchwork of habitats that intersect with built environments. The insects move between feeding sites and resting clusters, maintaining a connection between the resources of the surrounding landscape and the shelter provided by the house. Predator interactions are subtly altered by this behavior. While the warning coloration reduces the likelihood of attack, some predators may still test the group, particularly inexperienced individuals that have not yet learned to associate the pattern with unpalatability. In these moments, the density of the cluster can provide an additional layer of protection, as the movement of many individuals creates confusion and reduces the chance of any single insect being targeted. The occasional disturbance ripples through the group, a brief surge of motion that quickly settles back into stillness once the threat passes. As the storm approaches and the first drops of rain begin to fall, the clusters remain intact, their position carefully chosen to balance exposure and protection. The house, through its materials and structure, has created a series of microhabitats that align precisely with the needs of these insects during periods of environmental change. What might appear as an unusual gathering is in fact the visible expression of a complex set of adaptive behaviors where temperature, moisture, and shelter are continuously evaluated and acted upon. In this narrow band between human construction and the natural ground, the firebugs reveal a form of resilience rooted in cooperation without coordination, in collective presence without hierarchy. The encounter is not an intrusion but a moment of ecological clarity, where the functions of a building extend beyond human use and become part of a broader system of survival. The clustered forms along the foundation are a reminder that even the simplest surfaces can become critical habitats, shaped by the same forces that govern life beyond the walls. As daylight fades and the atmosphere thickens with the quiet pressure of an approaching storm, the landscape begins to lose its sharpness. Edges soften, colors flatten, and the distance between objects seems to dissolve into a dim, humid haze. In this suspended moment between calm and disturbance, light takes on a new significance. It no longer simply reveals the environment but reshapes it, carving out islands of visibility within a field of growing uncertainty. Against this backdrop, the presence of a house becomes more than structural. It becomes a signal, a luminous anchor in a space where orientation is increasingly difficult to maintain. Drawn toward this convergence of light and shelter, the leopard lacewing emerges, its delicate wings catching and refracting even the faintest illumination as it moves through the unstable air. The lacewing's flight is both fragile and precise, an intricate balance between lift and drift that depends on subtle air currents. Under stable conditions, it navigates with remarkable control, using visual cues and polarized light patterns from the sky to maintain direction. However, as humidity rises and storm air begins to compress the atmosphere, these cues become less reliable. Moisture scatters light differently, altering the polarization patterns that many insects depend on for navigation. At the same time, shifting microcurrents disrupt the smooth flow of air, making sustained, directed flight more energetically costly. In response, the lacewing adjusts its behavior, seeking out consistent visual references that stand out against the dimming environment. Artificial light provides exactly this kind of reference. A window glowing from within or a lamp illuminating a doorway creates a concentrated source of brightness that contrasts sharply with the surrounding darkness. For the lacewing, this is not simply an attraction, but a navigational recalibration. The light becomes a fixed point in an otherwise unstable field, offering a sense of direction that compensates for the loss of natural cues. As it approaches, the insect's wings beat in a soft, rapid rhythm, their fine network of veins supporting a structure that is both lightweight and resilient. Each movement is guided by sensory input from compound eyes that are highly sensitive to low light conditions, allowing the lacewing to detect subtle variations in brightness and motion. Upon reaching the surface of a window or the immediate vicinity of a lamp, the lacewing transitions from open flight to localized movement. It hovers briefly, then settles, its body aligning with the surface as its legs make contact. The transparency of its wings, patterned with faint markings that give the species its name, allows it to remain partially inconspicuous even in illuminated conditions. Yet its presence is unmistakable when viewed closely, a delicate architecture of membrane and vein that reflects the evolutionary refinement of flight in low-light environments. The attraction to light is intertwined with the need for shelter. As the storm approaches, the external environment becomes increasingly unpredictable, with gusts of wind and sudden shifts in air pressure creating a landscape of intermittent turbulence. For a small, lightweight insect, these conditions pose a significant challenge, increasing the risk of displacement or injury. The surfaces of a house, particularly those that are illuminated, offer a zone where these forces are moderated. Walls and windows break the wind, creating pockets of relative calm where the lacewing can rest and conserve energy. The warmth radiating from the interior adds another layer of stability, subtly influencing the microclimate at the boundary between inside and outside. Within this narrow margin, the lacewing's ecological role continues to unfold. As a predator, it feeds on small, soft-bodied insects such as aphids, which themselves respond to changes in weather by altering their distribution and activity. The presence of light can attract these prey species as well, creating localized concentrations that the lacewing can exploit. This interaction highlights a cascading effect, where the human use of light influences not only the movement of a single species, but the dynamics of a small community. The lacewing, in turn, contributes to the regulation of these populations, maintaining a balance that extends beyond the immediate scene. One of the more subtle adaptations of the lacewing lies in its reproductive strategy. Females lay their eggs on slender stalks, elevating each one above the surface to reduce the risk of cannibalism among emerging larvae. This behavior reflects a broader sensitivity to spatial arrangement and environmental context, where even small structural differences can have significant consequences for survival. In the vicinity of a house, such egg-laying may occur on nearby vegetation or sheltered surfaces, linking the artificial environment back to the natural substrates that support the species' life cycle. As the storm finally breaks, with rain beginning to fall and the air shifting into a new phase of movement, the lacewing remains within the protective boundary it has chosen. Some individuals may retreat further into sheltered crevices, while others hold their position against the surface, their delicate forms enduring the initial impact of changing conditions. The light continues to glow, steady and unwavering, even as the world beyond it becomes obscured by rain and shadow. In this convergence of illumination and shelter, the encounter between lacewing and house reveals a deeper pattern. Human structures, designed to provide stability and visibility, inadvertently create the very conditions that certain insects seek when the natural environment becomes difficult to navigate. The lacewing does not recognize the house as a human domain, but as a feature within its sensory landscape, one that offers both orientation and refuge at a critical moment. What appears as a simple attraction to light is, in reality, a complex behavioral response shaped by the interplay of atmospheric physics, sensory biology, and ecological necessity, unfolding quietly at the boundary between two worlds. In the final moments before rain arrives, when the sky lowers and the air becomes dense with suspended moisture, the boundary between stillness and motion sharpens into something almost tangible. Gardens fall quiet, leaves hold their position, and the usual background movement of insects begins to reorganize into brief, concentrated bursts of activity. Along the edge of a house, where porch lights cast a steady glow over potted flowers and sheltered corners, a different kind of motion appears, one that seems almost out of place in the thickening air. A hummingbird hawk moth hovers in front of a cluster of blossoms, its wings beating so rapidly that they dissolve into a soft blur, its body held perfectly stable as it feeds. In this narrow window before the storm breaks, both insect and observer are drawn to the same illuminated edge, each responding to the shifting conditions in their own way. The moth's flight is a remarkable convergence of power and control, more closely resembling that of a bird than a typical nocturnal insect. Its wings move in a figure-8 pattern, generating lift on both the upward and downward strokes, allowing it to remain suspended in place with precise adjustments. This hovering ability is not simply a display of agility, but a functional adaptation tied directly to its feeding strategy. The moth extends a long, flexible proboscis into the depths of tubular flowers, extracting nectar while remaining airborne. In doing so, it avoids landing, reducing the risk of predation and maintaining the ability to move quickly between food sources. The flowers themselves, often planted in pots near doorways or along garden paths, become focal points of activity, their nectar reserves concentrated and easily accessible in a space that is both illuminated and partially sheltered. As the atmosphere becomes more unstable, the distribution of scent changes in subtle but important ways. Humid air carries volatile compounds more effectively, allowing the fragrance of flowers to travel farther and remain more concentrated. For the hummingbird hawk moth, whose sensory system is finely tuned to detect these chemical cues, this creates a temporary expansion of its perceptual range. It can locate nectar sources with greater efficiency, even as the environment becomes visually dim and structurally unpredictable. At the same time, the rising humidity reduces the risk of desiccation, enabling longer periods of sustained flight and feeding. This combination of enhanced sensory input and physiological tolerance encourages the moth to remain active at a time when many other insects begin to withdraw. The presence of artificial light adds another layer of complexity to this interaction. While the hummingbird hawk moth is primarily active during twilight and early evening, it is not strictly bound to darkness and can operate effectively in low light conditions. The glow of a porch lamp or the illumination from a window extends the usable environment, creating a zone where visual and chemical cues overlap. The moth does not rely on light in the same disorienting way as many nocturnal insects, but it is influenced by the contrast it provides. The lit area becomes a stable reference point, a place where movement can be more easily controlled and where the risk of losing orientation in the shifting air is reduced. Within this illuminated margin, predator and prey dynamics continue to unfold. Small spiders may position themselves among the flowers, their webs nearly invisible in the dim light, waiting for an opportunity to intercept passing insects. The hummingbird hawk moth, with its rapid flight and hovering behavior, presents a difficult target. Yet the risk remains. Its large size and energetic movement also attract the attention of vertebrate predators such as bats, which may begin to patrol the area as darkness deepens. The moth's ability to accelerate quickly and change direction with precision becomes essential, allowing it to navigate a space where both opportunity and danger are concentrated. The proximity to human structures introduces an unusual overlap of behaviors. As the storm approaches, people often move toward windows or doorways, drawn by the changing light and the anticipation of rain. At the same time, the moth moves toward the same boundary, guided by scent, light, and the availability of nectar. The result is an encounter that feels immediate and close, not because either participant seeks the other, but because both are responding to the same environmental threshold. The glass of a window or the frame of a door becomes a shared interface, separating two worlds while allowing each to observe the other's presence. The moth's body, covered in fine scales and subtle coloration, reflects the ambient light in muted tones, its form both distinct and partially concealed. Its large compound eyes are adapted to function across a range of light levels, providing the visual acuity needed to coordinate complex flight in dim conditions. Beneath this sensory apparatus lies a metabolic system capable of sustaining high energy output, supported by rapid respiration and efficient energy use. This allows the moth to maintain its hovering flight even as the air becomes heavier and more resistant, a testament to the evolutionary pressures that have shaped its physiology. As the first drops of rain begin to fall, the conditions that supported this brief convergence begin to dissolve. The air cools, the scent of flowers is dampened, and the light becomes diffused through falling water. The moth responds by withdrawing, seeking shelter in vegetation or other protected spaces where it can endure the storm. The illuminated edge of the house, so active moments before, returns to stillness, its role as a temporary focal point complete. In this fleeting interval, the hummingbird hawk moth reveals a deeper connection between organism and environment, where behavior is shaped by the precise timing of atmospheric change. The house, with its lights and sheltered surfaces, becomes part of this system, offering a stable point in a landscape that is rapidly losing definition. The encounter is not an anomaly, but a predictable outcome of overlapping responses, where both insect and human are drawn to the last calm, visible edge before the storm fully arrives. On evenings when the air thickens and the horizon darkens long before night fully settles, the ground itself seems to hold a quiet tension, as if the landscape is waiting for a release that has not yet arrived. The atmosphere becomes heavy, saturated with moisture, and the subtle cooling that usually accompanies sunset is delayed, replaced instead by a lingering warmth that clings to surfaces. It is within this dense, almost suspended environment that the movement of larger insects becomes more pronounced, their presence no longer hidden within vegetation, but emerging into open space. Near the edges of human habitation, where porch lights cut through the dimness and walls retain the day's heat, a sudden, unmistakable figure may appear. The rhinoceros beetle, massive in proportion compared to most insects, arrives not with stealth, but with a kind of slow, deliberate inevitability, its armored body reflecting light in muted, polished tones. The initial impression is often one of scale, as the beetle's size disrupts expectations shaped by smaller, more familiar insects. Its body is compact, yet heavily built, encased in a rigid exoskeleton that functions both as protection and structural support. The defining horn, rising from the head or thorax depending on the species, gives the beetle its name and serves as a tool in intraspecific competition, where males engage in contests over access to mates. This structure, though seemingly exaggerated, is a product of sexual selection shaped by generations of interaction, where physical strength and leverage determine reproductive success. In the context of a storm approaching, however, the horn is secondary to the beetle's broader set of adaptations, which allow it to move through a changing environment with resilience. Humidity plays a critical role in enabling this movement. As moisture levels increase, the risk of desiccation decreases, allowing large beetles to remain active for longer periods without losing essential body water. The rhinoceros beetle, like many of its relatives, has a relatively low surface area to volume ratio, which helps conserve moisture but also requires a stable environment to maintain internal balance. The humid air of a pre-storm evening provides this stability, reducing physiological stress and encouraging dispersal. At the same time, softened soil and plant material release chemical cues more readily, creating a richer sensory landscape that can guide the beetle toward food sources or potential mates. Flight, though possible for many rhinoceros beetles, is an energetically demanding activity, particularly for an insect of such mass. The beetle's wings, folded beneath hardened forewings known as elytra, are deployed with a distinct mechanical precision, unfolding to generate lift through powerful rhythmic motion. In the dense, humid air before a storm, lift can be achieved more efficiently, as the increased air density provides greater resistance against the wings, enhancing their ability to generate upward force. This allows the beetle to traverse greater distances or maintain controlled flight paths even as wind patterns begin to shift. Yet the same atmospheric instability that aids lift also introduces unpredictability, with sudden gusts and changing currents disrupting sustained movement. In response, the beetle often descends toward the most prominent structures in the environment, seeking surfaces that provide both stability and orientation. A house, illuminated against the darkening background, becomes an unmistakable landmark, its vertical walls and defined edges offering a clear point of reference. The porch light, in particular, acts as a focal beacon, not necessarily because the beetle is intrinsically attracted to light, but because the brightness contrasts so sharply with the surrounding darkness that it becomes a navigational anchor. As the beetle approaches, its trajectory may appear erratic, influenced by shifting air currents and the challenge of maintaining control in a turbulent environment. Upon landing, the beetle's movement transitions from flight to a slow, deliberate crawl, its legs gripping the surface with remarkable strength. The texture of concrete steps, wooden beams, or painted walls provides enough irregularity for secure footing, while the retained warmth of these materials offers a localized microclimate that remains more stable than the open air. This warmth is not incidental. Throughout the day, these surfaces absorb solar energy, releasing it gradually as evening progresses. In the hours before a storm, when ambient temperatures may fluctuate unpredictably, this stored heat creates a buffer that can be exploited by ectothermic organisms seeking to maintain optimal body function. The visibility of the rhinoceros beetle in these moments is heightened not only by its size, but by its position within the illuminated space. Against the backdrop of a lit wall or step, its form becomes clearly defined, each segment of its body casting subtle shadows that emphasize its structure. For potential predators, this visibility could represent an opportunity, yet the beetle's robust exoskeleton and considerable strength reduce the likelihood of successful attack. Birds that might prey on smaller insects are less active at this time, while nocturnal predators such as bats may find the beetle's size and erratic flight less appealing compared to more manageable prey. There is a certain irony in the way this formidable insect, capable of exerting forces many times its own weight and equipped with adaptations for survival in dense forest environments, becomes momentarily disoriented by the artificial clarity of human lighting. The house, designed to provide security and visibility for its occupants, inadvertently creates a stage upon which the beetle's presence is both highlighted and constrained. Its arrival feels sudden, almost improbable. Yet it is the direct result of environmental conditions that favor movement, combined with a landscape that offers clear, if unintended, guidance. As the first signs of rain begin to manifest, the beetle may remain where it has landed, conserving energy and relying on its protective armor to endure the initial impact of changing conditions. Alternatively, it may seek a more sheltered position, moving toward crevices or overhangs where exposure is reduced. In either case, its presence at the threshold of the house is temporary, a brief intersection between the needs of an organism and the features of a structure that happens to meet those needs at a critical moment. In this encounter, the rhinoceros beetle embodies the convergence of scale, strength, and environmental sensitivity. Its appearance near a doorway or along a wall is not an anomaly, but a reflection of how atmospheric conditions, biological capacity, and human architecture interact. The house, standing firm against the approaching storm, becomes both a refuge and a reference point, while the beetle, drawn into its sphere, reveals the quiet complexity of movement within a world shaped by forces that extend far beyond the visible horizon. Along the threshold where cultivated space meets the open environment, a subtle redistribution of life begins to unfold as weather conditions shift. The air grows heavier, not yet rain, but carrying the promise of it, and the ground, once a stable surface of soil, leaf litter, and exposed roots, starts to lose its predictability. Small disturbances ripple outward as wind becomes inconsistent, lifting loose debris and altering the fine balance of moisture across the landscape. In this transitional moment, where neither dry calm nor full storm dominates, the red cotton bug emerges into clearer view, its vivid coloration standing in stark contrast against the muted tones of patios, walls, and potted plant surfaces. What was once dispersed across open ground begins to consolidate along the edges of human structures, forming clusters that signal a precise ecological response rather than a sluchina gathering. The red cotton bug's striking pattern of deep red and black is more than visual distinction. It is a functional adaptation tied to both defense and environmental exposure. These insects often feed on seeds, particularly those of cotton and related plants, extracting nutrients through piercing mouthparts that allow them to tap into stored plant resources. In natural conditions, they occupy areas where seeds accumulate, often on the ground beneath host plants. However, as moisture rises and wind begins to disrupt these zones, the seeds themselves may become less accessible, scattered or dampened in ways that reduce feeding efficiency. The insects respond not by dispersing further, but by shifting toward surfaces that offer stability and proximity to both shelter and residual food sources. Human structures inadvertently replicate these conditions. A patio, with its flat, often sun-warmed surface, provides a dry platform even as the surrounding soil becomes increasingly saturated. Potted plants, elevated and contained, maintain a distinct microenvironment where moisture is moderated and seeds or organic debris may accumulate in predictable ways. The walls of a house, particularly near the ground, create a boundary layer where wind is reduced and temperature fluctuations are less extreme. For the red cotton bug, these features combine to form a network of microhabitats that are both accessible and reliable during periods of environmental instability. Clustering behavior becomes more pronounced under these conditions, not as a social structure, but as an emergent property of shared preferences and constraints. Individual insects move towards similar environmental cues: dryness, warmth, reduced airflow, and in doing so, converge in the same locations. The result is a visible aggregation that can appear sudden and concentrated, yet is driven by a series of small, independent decisions aligned by external factors. Within these clusters, the insects maintain close proximity, which can influence both temperature and moisture dynamics at a very local scale. By grouping together, they create a slightly buffered environment where the effects of wind and evaporation are diminished, allowing for more stable physiological conditions. Thermoregulation plays a central role in this behavior. As ectothermic organisms, red cotton bugs rely on external heat sources to regulate their body temperature, which in turn affects their metabolic rate and activity level. The surfaces of walls and patios, having absorbed heat during the day, release it gradually as evening approaches, creating a thermal gradient that the insects can exploit. By positioning themselves along these gradients, they can maintain an optimal temperature range, even as the broader environment cools or becomes erratic. This ability to fine-tune their position in response to microclimatic variation is a key factor in their survival during periods of change. The presence of these insects also reflects a broader ecological interaction with the surrounding plant community. Many ornamental plants used in human spaces belong to the same families as the cotton plants that red cotton bugs naturally exploit. This creates a continuity between wild and cultivated environments, where the insects can move between natural food sources and those inadvertently provided by human landscaping. Seeds that fall into pots or accumulate along edges become focal points for feeding, linking the insect's nutritional needs to the structure of the built environment. Predator dynamics shift alongside these changes. Birds that might forage on open ground are less effective in areas where human activity is frequent, while smaller predators, such as ants or spiders, may exploit the edges of structures to intercept prey. The red cotton bug's coloration serves as a deterrent, signaling the presence of chemical defenses that make them less palatable. However, this does not eliminate predation entirely, and the insects must remain responsive to movement and disturbance within their clustered groups. A sudden ripple through the aggregation can indicate the approach of a threat, prompting brief dispersal before the group reforms once the disturbance has passed. As the storm begins to assert itself, with the first drops of rain striking surfaces and the air shifting into a more dynamic state, the insects remain within their chosen zones, relying on the protection offered by overhangs, edges, and elevated surfaces. The open ground, now increasingly saturated and unstable, becomes less viable, reinforcing the importance of these transitional spaces. The house, in this context, is not merely a barrier between inside and outside, but a complex interface that provides gradients of shelter, temperature, and stability. In this narrow band between environments, the red cotton bug reveals a pattern of movement shaped by the interplay of moisture, wind, and structural features. The encounter that unfolds along walls, patios, and potted plants is not sluchina, but the visible outcome of a system in motion, where organisms respond to shifting conditions with precision and adaptability. The home, standing at the edge of these changes, becomes part of the ecosystem, offering the very conditions that allow these insects to persist through the uncertainty of approaching weather. As the first sustained sheets of rain begin to strike the ground, the transformation is immediate and profound, not only across the visible landscape, but within the hidden architecture beneath it. Soil, which moments earlier held its structure through a delicate balance of moisture and cohesion, begins to loosen and shift under the weight of water. Pores fill, air is displaced, and the intricate network of tunnels constructed by leafcutter ants faces a sudden and escalating threat. What appears from above as a simple downpour is, at ground level, a force capable of collapsing passageways, flooding chambers, and severing the carefully maintained routes that connect colony to resource. In response, the ants initiate a rapid behavioral adjustment, redirecting movement away from compromised terrain and towards surfaces that offer greater stability, even if those surfaces belong to an entirely different kind of environment. Along the base of a house, where foundation meets soil, the conditions differ sharply from the saturated ground beyond. Concrete, stone, and compacted materials resist absorption, shedding water rather than holding it. This creates narrow zones where the surface remains comparatively dry and firm, forming linear pathways that extend along walls, thresholds, and the edges of structures. For leafcutter ants, which depend on reliable routes to transport harvested plant material, these zones become critical alternatives. The house, without intention, presents itself as both obstacle and opportunity, a solid barrier that redirects movement while simultaneously offering a navigable corridor. The ants themselves operate within a highly organized system, where individual actions contribute to a collective outcome shaped by chemical communication. As rain disrupts established trails, pheromone markers laid along previous routes begin to degrade, washed away or diluted by moisture. This loss of chemical guidance forces the colony to re-establish its network, with foragers exploring new directions and reinforcing successful paths through repeated use. Along the edge of a wall, the reduced impact of rainfall allows pheromone trails to persist longer, providing a stable medium for communication. Over time, these routes become more defined, with increasing numbers of ants following the same path, their movement forming a continuous flow that mirrors the efficiency of their original tunnels. The structural features of a house introduce a unique set of navigational cues that differ from those found in natural environments. Vertical surfaces create boundaries that guide movement in predictable directions, while corners and edges concentrate activity into narrower channels. For an ant whose sensory world is dominated by chemical gradients and tactile feedback, these features simplify decision-making by reducing the number of possible pathways. The result is a form of linear organization, where the complexity of the surrounding landscape is distilled into a manageable route that can be maintained even under adverse conditions. Thermoregulation, though less immediately apparent, also plays a role in this behavior. The materials that make up a foundation absorb and retain heat differently than saturated soil, creating slight tap gradients along the surface. These gradients can influence ant activity by affecting metabolic rates and the speed at which individuals can move and respond. In cooler, rain-soaked conditions, even a small increase in temperature can provide a functional advantage, allowing ants to maintain a higher level of activity as they adapt to the changing environment. This subtle interaction between structure and physiology highlights the extent to which the built environment can influence biological processes at a fine scale. Within the colony, the disruption caused by heavy rain extends beyond the loss of pathways. Chambers that house developing larvae and fungal gardens, which are central to the leafcutter ant's symbiotic relationship with cultivated fungus, must be protected from flooding. Workers may shift their efforts toward reinforcing tunnel walls, relocating vulnerable material, or adjusting ventilation to manage humidity levels within the nest. This internal reorganization occurs simultaneously with the external rerouting of foraging trails, reflecting the colony's ability to respond to environmental stress on multiple fronts. Predator dynamics are also altered by the presence of these new pathways. Surfaces near human structures may be less frequented by certain predators that rely on open ground for hunting, providing a relative refuge for the ants as they move. However, this does not eliminate risk entirely. Opportunistic predators such as small arachnids or other insects may exploit the concentrated movement along these routes, positioning themselves to intercept passing ants. The ants, in turn, rely on their numbers and coordinated movement to reduce individual vulnerability, with the continuous flow of workers making it difficult for predators to target any single individual effectively. As the rain continues, the contrast between saturated ground and the sheltered edges of the house becomes more pronounced. Water flows across open surfaces, pooling in low areas and further destabilizing the soil, while the narrow band along the foundation remains comparatively intact. The ants persist within this band, their movement steady and purposeful, adapting to a landscape that is being reshaped in real time. The house, in this moment, functions as more than a static structure. It becomes a dynamic element within the ecosystem, influencing the distribution and behavior of organisms through its interaction with weather and terrain. In this convergence of natural process and human construction, the leafcutter ant reveals a broader principle of survival. Adaptation is not limited to the environments in which a species evolved, but extends to any context where the necessary conditions can be found or created. The house, though designed for human shelter, inadvertently provides the stability and continuity that the ants require when their own systems are disrupted. The encounter that unfolds along walls and thresholds is not an intrusion, but a realignment, where the boundaries between natural and built environments blur under the pressure of changing conditions. As the storm reaches its peak and the landscape settles into a new equilibrium, the ants continue their work, maintaining the roots that have allowed them to endure the disruption. The temporary pathways along the house may eventually fade as the ground dries and original trails are restored, but for a time, they represent a critical adaptation, a bridge between stability and uncertainty. In this brief intersection, the house stands as barrier, shelter, and guide, shaping the movement of life at its edge in ways that are both subtle and profound.